Now, I know this isn't the craziest of fight weeks, but I'm going to have to talk about the fights that are coming up this weekend, especially the one involving Jaime Munguia and Edgar Berlanga on opposite coasts. So, with that being said, roll that beautiful bean footage.
Hey, hear him. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier.
Hey, what's up with it, family? It's Hot Boxing Minute, your favorite pharmaceutical engineer, back at it with the realness, of course, as only I can bring it to you. Now, let me first start off by saying this. Boxing has been over-delivering in 2022. We have been getting back-to-back awesome fights, undisputed fights, title unification fights, the best fighting the best, undisputeds fighting undisputed. We get history being made with the girls fighting out there in Madison Square Garden. Of course, Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano. We can't have it every weekend, folks. And this weekend coming up, there are some big fights coming up, as far as not big fights, major event promotion fights. But I wouldn't call them big fights as far as boxing fans are concerned, but I don't think it would be right if I didn't at least gloss over them. So, without further ado, I'm going to talk about the one going down this Saturday at the Honda Center out there in Anaheim. Jaime Munguia is going to be fighting Jimmy Kelly. Oh, I know. Who the hell is Jimmy Kelly? Well, I'm a big Jaime Munguia fan, or actually, yeah, I guess that's the right word to say it. I'm a fan of Jaime Munguia. I feel like if I say I'm a big fan of a fighter, it means I'm a fanboy. I am not a fanboy, folks. I'm a fan of boxing. Being a fan of the fighters comes as a peripheral. Definitely more a fan of boxing in and of itself. But either way, without much fanfare, we've got Jaime Munguia fighting Jimmy Kelly this weekend in Anaheim at the Honda Center. And even though it isn't the most major promoted fight, I still think it's going to be a bit interesting. Now, Jaime Munguia is at an interesting Jaime Munguia is at an interesting place in his career because he's been getting a lot of backlash about his choice of opposition lately. His last fight was Demetrius Ballard. People weren't too happy about that. Now he's fighting Jimmy Kelly, and people are still grumbling about that. Now, regardless of who his opponent is, when it comes to Jaime Munguia and his opposition selection, to a certain degree, they're leaning on the commercial appeal of him being Mexican because Mexican boxing fans are pretty loyal and diehard, and even against an opponent like Jimmy Kelly, I guess they figure some will show up at least enough to justify renting out an arena. I don't know. But where other fighters will fake injuries and postpone an event just to get out of a fight, I think they're going to lean on the Mexican fan base, which tends to be pretty loyal out there in Southern California, where I'm from. In fact, I might even end up going to the fight. So, now I do think that Jaime Munguia versus Jimmy Kelly isn't a total loss. At the very least, it should be fairly entertaining. Jimmy Kelly is coming off of a ride of confidence. Jimmy Kelly is coming off of a wave of confidence. Now, why was Jimmy Kelly chosen as the guy to fight Jaime Munguia? Well, Jimmy Kelly just recently got off a victory win over Kanat Islam. Though he's not really known in the American markets, Kanat Islam was an Olympic bronze medalist that was pretty much knocking out everybody he was fighting. Jimmy Kelly ended up taking him the whole distance and kind of got a little bit of notoriety for that across the pond. I'm not really sure why Jaime Munguia isn't fighting the likes of Demetrius Andrade or Jamal Charlo. Hey, it is what it is. Either way, I'm showing up. Jaime Munguia what's his record right now? Let me see if I can pull this up. All right, y'all. We got Jaime Munguia. He's 25 years old, 39-0 with 31 knockouts, going up against Jimmy Kelly. Jimmy Kelly, 29 years old, 26-2 with 10 knockouts. Jimmy Kelly got 2 losses there against Dennis Hogan. Okay. Here's the part that makes it odd. Jimmy Kelly is going to be fighting Jaime Munguia. Jimmy Kelly is 26-2. His 2 losses come against Dennis Hogan and Liam Smith, 2 opponents that are already lost to Jaime Munguia. Some would argue Dennis Hogan actually beat Jaime Munguia, even though he got the majority decision win. And then we have Liam Smith, who I think most can say confidently it was a unanimous decision win in favor of Jaime Munguia, even though it was a very close fight. So we've got Jaime Munguia fighting Jimmy Kelly, and Jimmy Kelly's 2 losses come against 2 opponents that Jaime Munguia already beat. I think some might feel it's a step backwards, but regardless, I'm going to watch the fight. It is what it is, folks. Jaime Munguia representing Zona Norte out there in TJ under the guidance of Eric Morales as his advisor, not his main trainer, but he's made a lot of evolutionary progress in his development, and I think he's ready for the elites in the middleweight division. Actually, I would pick him and favor him over both Jamal Charlo and Demetrius Andrade, to be dead honest. But we'll see how that develops in the future. So, really quickly, I'm going to throw it out there. Jaime Munguia versus Jimmy Kelly. I think Jaime Munguia is going to get the win. Likely a stoppage. Sorry, Jimmy Kelly, but that's just what I think is going to happen. I'd say middle of the round, middle of the fight. Anyways, boxing community, how do you think that fight plays out? Let me know in the comments section. Let's chop this up. All right. Now we got that fight going on in LA. We're going to switch over to across to the other side of the country, out there in New York City, Madison Square Garden at the Hulu Center. Edgar Berlanga, the monster. The monster. He's going to be fighting Romer Angulo, another Puerto Rican. This is interesting. You know, they like to do those Puerto Rican, those Puerto Rico fighter cards out there because they sell well out there in Madison Square Garden, much like the Mexican fans out here in Southern California. Out there in the East Coast, the Puerto Rican fans are always obviously going to support. So we've got Edgar Berlanga, and Edgar Berlanga against Romer Angulo is kind of an interesting matchup, to be honest. Edgar Berlanga is in an interesting position as far as where he is in the public's eyes. Now, it isn't his fault that he came straight out the gate, knocking a bunch of people out. If anything, I think, how do I word this correctly? If anything, I think Edgar Berlanga is a victim of his own early success and the way Top Rank marketed him. It wasn't his fault he got 16 straight knockouts in the first round to begin his career. And then he ended up hitting, not really roadblocks, but kind of, the knockout streak ended when he fought guys like, Marcelo Cosetas and Steve Rolls. And this fight between Romer Angulo and Edgar Berlanga is kind of a transition or a crossroads fight for both of them. Edgar Berlanga really needs to get the knockout and make a statement to the rest of the division because he struggled in his last couple fights against both Steve Rolls and Cosetas. And then you got Romer Angulo. He is 38 years old. So he's in a position in his career where he wants to get another title shot. Now, we know that Edgar Berlanga, up until this point in his career, in his development, has been fighting fighters who have just fallen short of winning championship belts. Now, Edgar Berlanga's previous two opponents, both Cosetas and Steve Rolls, had challenged for titles and fell short. Cosetas fought Billy Joe Saunders and lost. Steve Rolls got clapped by Gennady Golovkin. Romer Angulo, his two opponents and his chances were against David Benavidez and Zurdo Ramirez. Both times he lost. Actually, he only challenged once against David Benavidez. So yeah. You've got Jaime Munguia fighting a guy who challenged for a championship. Now, Romer Angulo, let's talk about Romer Angulo. Romer Angulo isn't exactly the most fleet-footed fighter in the world. Definitely has heavy knockout power. So you've got Edgar Berlanga, a guy who's pseudo-established for having crazy amounts of power, which hasn't really translated once he moves up in difficulty against opponents. And Romer Angulo, who himself is a puncher. His record is 27-2 with 23 KOs. I wouldn't call Romer Angulo fleet of foot. He is a rather sedentary kind of target, but he does throw back with power. So this should be at least an interesting challenge for Edgar Berlanga. Will Edgar Berlanga fold under the pressure of that Colombian fighting power that Romer Angulo brings to the card? Oh, did I call Romer Angulo Puerto Rican to start off with? Oh, Lord. Romer Angulo's Colombian, y'all. Kind of like Edison Miranda. So, Edgar Berlanga fighting Romer Angulo, who's Colombian. Kind of like Edison Miranda, he was heavy-handed. That's a thing with the Colombians I've noticed. So at the very least, you have the possibility of Edgar Berlanga maybe getting knocked down, possibly getting knocked out against a fighter with heavy hands like Romer Angulo. But I really don't think that's going to happen because, there's an age difference there. You've got Edgar Berlanga, who's 25 years old. You've got Romer Angulo, who is 38 years old. Now, when it comes to an age difference like what they got between the age difference between Edgar Berlanga at 25, Romer Angulo at 38 years old, that is pretty dramatic age difference. That is 13 whole years. That definitely can take it out of a fighter going on the back end, or not the back end, but the later half of a fight. When it comes to Romer Angulo versus Edgar Berlanga, I'm going to have to lean in favor of the more youthful fighter. These are both power hitters, but I think Edgar Berlanga is going to pull off this win. Anyways, that's what I think is going to happen in that fight. And the last fight I wanted to talk about, there really isn't any glory going on in this here video. We've got Trevor Bryan against Daniel Dubois. Triple D, Danny Dubois. Y'all remember Danny Dubois? He was the one that got his eye socket broken by, who was the other big guy from out there across the pond? Jesus. It's all not coming to me right now, y'all. Hold on. Joe Joyce. So, Joe Joyce cracked Danny Dubois' eye in November of 2020, but since then he's come back and rattled off 2 TKO wins. Now, we've also got Trevor Bryan. He himself is an undefeated fighter. His record is 22-0 with 15 knockouts. When it comes to Danny Dubois and Trevor Bryan, we've got 2 big heavyweights, both of them with knockout power, but the betting odds are definitely in Danny Dubois' favor. I believe Triple D, Danny Dubois, should not have too much of a problem dispatching Trevor Bryan. But don't dismiss Trevor Bryan, folks. This has been the year of upsets. Anything can happen in the boxing game, especially when you're dealing with big, heavy-handed heavyweights like Danny Dubois and Trevor Bryan. But I believe Danny Dubois has a deeper amateur pedigree, and I believe that's going to show through on this. I think the most interesting thing with this Danny Dubois fight against Trevor Bryan this weekend is going to be the fact that it's promoted by Don King. Don King is 90 years old, and the main question I have is who's going to outlive who? At 90 years old, Don King and Bob Arum, both 90. Who's going to outlive who? You tell me. Both those guys are just ancient dinosaurs in the game and somehow still putting events together. That baffles my mind. But anyways, I'm picking Danny Dubois to win in that fight. They're fighting in Miami, Florida. It is co-promoted by Frank Warren out there with Queensberry Promotions, so it should be airing on BT Sports. And I do believe it's probably going to be a much bigger event to the British fans than it is to the American fans as a whole. They're fighting for the minor WBA heavyweight strap that Trevor Bryan has. He has the minor belt. The main belt, of course, is being held by Oleksandr Usyk, the unified heavyweight champion of the world. Boxing community, hit like if you haven't already done so. Press that follow button. Leave a comment. This is Hot Boxing Minute, y'all. Peace.